Welcome to another installment of Supply Chain Deep Dive. I am Frederic Clulow. I am responsible for Kezzler's traceability portfolio across the Americas. And I have the pleasure today of sitting now with my colleague, Hans-Petter Hübert, who is the Director for Strategic Initiatives and DPP expert for Kezzler. HP, it's a pleasure to be sitting down with you. Every single time I come to Norway, I say, I have to sit down with you and we have to hammer something about DPP, because that question comes out quite a bit in our region. But before we dive into the meat of the substance, for those who are not familiar with you, because a lot of people are in the DPP space, perhaps a lot of people in the Americas may not be quite familiar with you and your work in DPP and Surpass. So can you tell us a little bit about you, yourself, and your work in DPP and what we are doing there?
Yeah, sure. So I've been with Kezzler for almost 3 years now. But I come from the apparel industry. So with my former employer, Holzweiler, we started an early phase DPP project already back in 2022, even before ESPR was adopted. So ESPR is the regulation that across all categories, or most categories, defines the requirements for the digital product passport. So I've been on both sides of the table, and here with Kezzler, I'm involved in DPP projects in various sectors, apparel, detergents, batteries, and more to come. And I'm also heading our Surpass 2 project, which is a huge EU-funded DPP project where we are demonstrating that we can issue passports at scale. But also, more interestingly, I think, what else we can use a passport for. So how the digital product passport can support circular use cases or enhance traceability, transparency, improve manufacturing control, and so forth.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a really interesting segue, I guess, to start framing what DPP is, right? So I guess to start with, is DPP merely just another annoying compliance requirement that you have, or is this really becoming a market access requirement? And if so, if you might infer or explain this, are we really seeing a global trend towards DPP-like solutions globally beyond Europe?
Yes, I think this is really interesting because, regulations are not always that popular. DPP seems to gain global traction. The EU was first, but it's being adopted all over the world now, with most prominently China, but also in other regions of the world, because they see the value of embedding a sensor and identity to the product that you can engage with throughout the life cycle and collect information even after the product has left the store. So I think more and more people see the potential beyond compliance. Yes, at the core, it is a market access regulation. But I also think that more and more companies see the huge potential beyond the compliance part.
And what does a market access look like? Because my understanding is that obviously this is going to be staggered across different categories, right? So certain products are going to come first. So what does that compliance look like from a time frame in product perspective?
Yeah, so if you look at ESPR, which is the cross-category regulation, as mentioned, the first working plan from the ESPR was released just over a year ago. And there you had the prioritization from the European Union on what categories come first. So the first category is actually iron and steel. That's intermediate products, with the delegated act expected later this year. And then you have 18 months at least to make sure your products are compliant. After that, we will see apparel, and that is apparel, the left footwear, and other textiles other than apparel out of the first working plan. And we will see tires, car tires, mattresses, and furniture is also coming the next few years. So by 2030, we expect to have delegated acts for most of the categories. And there's also an expectation that you don't need delegated act, which is a secondary legislation specifying all the details. So when the ball has started to roll, the next or the later categories will come on much faster. So for apparel, for example, that we work extensively with, and that is also the pilot we run in Surpass. The Delegated Act is expected late next year or adopted early in 28, and then you have 18 months at least to comply. So we are looking into 29 before companies need to have this in place, but many companies have started already, which I believe is a good idea. And the signal when you have to start is when the Delegated Act enters into force. Then you have at least 18 months, but you really need that time, and we see that time and time again, that the data collection and management challenge should not be underestimated here.
So, and I think we'll highlight that in a second, but just to make it clear, unlike some other regulations, this is not something where you can not comply and then you simply accept the fine. This is really a market access tool where unless you have this, you will not be able to sell and deliver your goods into the European market. Is that correct?
Yeah, no, that is correct. And if you compare, for example, with the GDPR, we have seen humongous fines for companies, and it's talk about the same levels here with 4% of your gross revenue. So this is definitely a market access regulation. And having said that, I don't think many companies need to be scared of the mandatory requirements. They are probably going to be fairly light, and we know quite a lot about this already from preliminary reports from the JRC, which is the research center from the European Commission. So it's not going to be very difficult to comply with the rules. DPP really started as an ESG or CSR sustainability tool, and as the European Union has shifted a little bit towards more competitiveness, you can see that DPP has followed. So the DPP sustainability requirements are lighter now than many people expected and hoped for. Having said that, we are pretty sure that the first version of DPP is not going to be the last version. So it's and that is something I strongly support as well. Don't make it too difficult to comply. Get the system up and running first, make it fairly easy to join the system and be compliant, and then gain some experience before you change the requirements. So we will see version 2 and 3 of DPP in later years.
In that question of regulatory evolution, I think is highly interesting. We certainly see the same in the US with some of the traceability regulations that are coming online, where we anticipate that there's going to be some expansion of the number of products that are covered. And I think that poses a question for a lot of organizations, particularly in Latin America, which is an exporting region to most of the world, not only the US, but European Union and Asia, where they're saying, look, I now have to comply with American regulations. I have to comply with Chinese regulations also on traceability, digital product disclosure. Now I have to comply with EUDR as well for some other commodities, and I also have to comply with DPP. So what do you tell to these companies who are looking at the regulatory mandates, because they all have to comply within the same time frame, roughly speaking, and the challenge that they're facing in terms of building separate data silos and separate systems? How can they overcome that challenge?
Yeah, no, that's a big and a great question, and something that we strongly recommend the companies we are talking to. Don't look for a EU DPP solution. Don't look for a FISMA 204 solution. You should look for a platform where you can collect and structure all your traceability and production data, and then use that data set to fuel different experiences or different regulatory requirements. So one platform for all traceability regulatory requirements.
That's an interesting point, because compliance is usually seen as a cost, right? Either in man time, in documentation, and so on and so forth. So the question becomes, how can I use these platform and my data to change the narrative, change the positioning from compliance as a cost to compliance as an investment to drive additional initiatives? So what do you see, and perhaps we can get into some of the use cases that we're seeing here through our DPP projects. around what our customers and what the market is doing surrounding DPP implementation, DPP data, and how they're leveraging the transformation from just compliance to enabling these other use cases that you're talking about.
Yeah, let me start with compliance, because I think actually it is a little bit underestimated or not enough talked about, the benefits of being compliant in a DPP system. Because for at least for my old industry, the apparel industry, it is the lack of standards and interoperability is causing so much manual work throughout the supply chain, with suppliers typing or giving in data, and you have platforms like Zalando and those guys asking the brands for data, and they are all more or less the same, but not exactly the same. So there's so much time waste due to the lack of standards and interoperability. So I think only from the compliance part of the DPP program is going to be hugely beneficial for many companies and many industries. And then on top of that, as I mentioned previously, the fact that you embed a sensor in a garment, we always or very often argue for serialized or item level identification, because that is the granularity that supports all use cases. But this is something that all companies must consider carefully and make sure they know and understand the difference between those granularity levels and what they can do on each of them and cannot do on each of them. But with serialized item level granularity, you can follow an instance of a product through the supply value chain. You can log events after all the way from production through the point of sale, through a repair, through a resale event, and eventually at the end of life. And to get those dots connected and enabling a much better consumer experience or customer experience. For example, with the Holsweiler project that we are doing, you can scan the QR code, press repair, and you can get guidance straight to the designated repair partner. If we aren't there yet, but we are working on it, if you have captured a POS transaction in that same garment, the garment becomes the receipts. You can connect warranty, for example, to that product. When you deliver it to the repair shop, the invoice can go here or there, depending on if the product is under warranty or not, as an example. You could theoretically bring that information also into a resale event if you swap or change the zipper, for example, on an expensive outerwear product. That could be useful information in a resale event. In that solution that we have done together with Holsweiler, we are also getting feedback from that resale platform. So Holsweiler knows how much a certain product is worth in the second-hand market, and we know from research or from reports, for example, from ThreadUp, that this is becoming more and more important for retail customers. The higher the resale value of a product, the higher the willingness to pay firsthand. So I think there are endless opportunities, and I could talk for hours about the potential benefits here. With Holsweiler, I don't think we thought of every use case being enabled from this yet. When we launched the project with Holsweiler, we hadn't thought of that the store associates could start to scan the codes and read about the products and learn everything about the product that they could use with the customer and engage more with the customer. So yeah, it had an immediate positive impact when we launched the first collection back in 23 with the use case that we didn't even think about.
It's fascinating how that baseline of compliance, that architecture is actually enabling so many different use cases that, again, are flipping the script from this is merely a compliance cost to this is really an opportunity to either drive reusable initiatives, circularity initiatives, provide further transparency to the consumer. But on that, I want to double click on a comment that you made. So do you foresee, or is this already taking place, an environment where the European consumer itself becomes more discriminating because of that transparency information, and therefore enabling that transparency and a richer set of data being transmitted through a DPP-enabled product, creating branding difference and I guess better market positioning as opposed to a product with less transparency?
I wish to believe so, but I don't. I don't think some consumers will, of course, do that, but the vast majority, especially in fashion, will not. So I don't think that's going to be the big benefit or the thing that changes the world. I think it's going to be more important, the kind of the peer pressure between brands. You don't want to have the lowest score. You don't want to be the worst in class. And this is becoming so much more transparent. So I think that fact will kind of force the brands to, or motivate the brands, incentivize the brands to do better. I don't think many consumers will scan different labels and compare and go for the most sustainable garment. They will look at what they think they will look great in and look at the price, and those are the most important factors, and it's going to be the most important factors even with the DPP, I think.
That's really interesting. I think we're almost at time, so I'm going to put you on the spot, though. I mean, as you look at how this universe is unfolding, if you had to give 3 pieces of advice to anybody looking at implementing a DPP initiative, what would that be?
Yeah, so I would start with working on a digital ID or DPP strategy. So compliance is a given, you have to do that, but what else do you want to do? That's crucial because the use cases that you want to do or the strategy that you put forward kind of decides what granularity level you have to choose on your product identifier. And it also tells you what beyond mandatory data attributes you need to collect. So there are certain data points that are important to support certain use cases. So to have that strategy is crucial. That's number one. And then, of course, you need to look for the right partners. This is a complicated landscape, and there are DPP providers popping up every week almost. So back to what we talked about earlier, look for a platform that can support you way beyond DPP compliance. That is not the hard part. Maybe your ERP partner can do that for you. So look for partners that can support you on your strategy and think about the shifting regulatory landscape. You need a flexible platform. And you need a scalable platform because the amount of data that we are looking into here is quite interesting when we follow garments or products from cradle to grave in all categories. Yeah, so I think those are the critical decisions or topics to start working on. You should also secure some regulatory competency or capabilities, preferably internally, because it's at the end of the day, it's your responsibility that you are compliant. But if you are a small company, maybe you don't have those resources, then it becomes even more important what kind of partners you select. So strategy, partners, regulatory or access to regulatory capabilities or competency.
Wonderful. HP, thank you so much. This has been very informative. I think next time I'm in Oslo, we should do a follow-up with, just to see where DPP is and, share some more learnings from what we're seeing in the market and some of the applications that we're putting out there.